Arizona and run for sheriff. And I told them they were crazy. And this is one time my wife agreed with me that her parents were crazy. And she really did, do you know? And then 3 months later we did the crazy thing, picked up and left, and went home to Arizona. And I took a leave of absence from Provo, because in case I didn't win, I could come back. And I had to commute to Provo for court cases, and other things, that I had to be there for, like 6 times, during the campaign. Sometimes I was literally campaigning on the phone from Provo. And it's totally a miracle. So, and then after the miracle, we started to say winning this election, not having even lived in my own community for 13 years, and never being a cop in Arizona, or my community ever before, and then winning sheriff. And we all talked about what a miracle that was. And my wife and mother, both being sensitive to that when I filed the lawsuit on the Brady Bill, both of them within a day, mentioned to me, now we know why you were elected sheriff. And it really did seem to be an errand for the Almighty. And it went a real roller coaster ride. That's really how I described the lawsuit. One day it would be that we were getting inducted into the NRA Hall of Fame, and the next day we were being demonized by the national media as right-wing extremist radical terrorists. And most of you've been called the same thing, because you believe in the Constitution. And isn't it amazing that those who quote the Constitution and the Founding Fathers today are demonized as radical extremists, and even terrorists? How sad that our Constitution has taken on that kind of public scrutiny. Amazing that our media would allow that to happen, and that politicians who go along with this redistribution of the wealth and forced charity, as we were talking about earlier, see forced charity by government as tyranny. And if charity has to be forced, it's not charity, folks. It's not charity. Call it anything but charity. It's not charity. And I thought all of that, and I started studying the Constitution way back, and the importance of this book. It's a short booklet, it's 30 pages long, but it's probably the most powerful 30 pages you'll read anywhere. It talks about my personal conversion to the Constitution. And did I say conversion? I said conversion, didn't I? It was a religious and spiritual experience for me, and it happened during the process. The biggest part of it was when I took a class, taught by my mentor and friend, and one of the most stalwart constitutionalists on the face of this planet, when I attended his class called Constitutional Studies for Law Enforcement. You probably know who it is now, Cleon Skousen, W. Cleon Skousen. He was really famous for that, wasn't he? It didn't matter who he was talking to, it was constitutional studies for teachers, or constitutional studies for janitors, or constitutional studies for cops, or constitutional studies for cops' wives. It was all the same, he just named it to whoever he was teaching, but it was all the same class, and it was always about the Constitution. And it talks about that in here, and how some things happened in my life that got me from being a numbers cop of just writing the tickets, which I believe now is one of the greatest abuses of government that we have anywhere in our country. The revenue collection that happens because these guys wear a badge called radar tickets is an absolute outrage and abuse. It is a lark. We've got to change it. And I really hope most of you know where I got the title for this book. Somebody mentioned a little while ago the proper role of government. Well, I learned that from Cleon. Just change it and make it a little bit more job specific. And so is this meant for cops to read this? Absolutely. And should every one of you read it first? Absolutely. And the gist of this is every police officer in this country took an oath, and has taken an oath, as well as most school teachers, and every public official, to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution. And what happens when we, as I was, as sheriff, placed in the quandary of choosing between statutory obedience or constitutional adherence? See, that's the quandary I was in. There's a statute from on high from Washington, D.C. that said the Brady Bill must be enforced by you sheriffs. And now I'm in the predicament of saying, but I read the Constitution. And I know that I was constitutionally elected by, for, and of the people of Grand County, to protect and, according to my oath, their constitutional rights. And in a democracy, I could probably have a lot of leeway, but, do you know, because as soon as one person, or more than 50% of the people in my community said go ahead and enforce the Brady Bill, you got our permission, then I could do that in a democracy. but in a constitutional republic, where I gave my word to protect the Constitution. If 100% of the people in my community said for me to enforce it, I could not, because I would be violating my word. And you see, the Founding Fathers were naive in that sense, is that when they put the requirement that every public official, state and local, would swear allegiance to the Constitution, they intended and trusted us that we would keep our word. And that might have been part of their problem. They should have put something in there that would punish us if we did not. And maybe they did, but it wasn't specific enough for today's political correctness problem. And I think you know, if you don't go with the Constitution, then you're probably under the heading of the treason crime. But boy, I'll tell you, if we have the FBI doing all of that, doing all the follow-up on all the traitors in Washington, D.C., boy would they be busy, and finally have something to do that would be legitimate. And I would like to make one other point out of this book. I make reference to a hero of mine. Her name was Rosa Parks. And do you know what? We need to pay attention to her story. Because what did she teach us? And what does the left side honor her for? And, in fact, she got some congressional awards just a couple of years ago for what she did. And it was because she defied stupid law. And I believe that falls right in with our theory that defiance of tyranny is obedience to God. See, she was arrested. It wasn't just a tradition that she give up her seat to a white man. It was the law. And what did the cop do when he got there? The same thing he tells us when he takes our gun, or when he puts us in jail, or he writes the ticket when we complain about his actions. What does he say? Just doing my job. Do you know I don't make the law, lady? I'm the enforcer. And every cop will tell you that there's been plenty of times during his career that he hasn't enforced every law. We're not required to, we shouldn't, and we shouldn't be obeying about 98% of the laws we're enforcing about 98% that are there now, as a matter of routine. If you've ever been to any of these courts that they call justice courts in Utah and across America, they are anything but. The judge is a rubber stamp for a police officer, and the police officer is a rubber stamp for the legislature, and here we have the executive and judicial and legislative branches all meshed into one. In fact, what are the police officers? Say, basically they are puppets for the judges and the legislative branches, and that they are just following orders. Well, that's what the cop said when he went to arrest Rosa Parks. And he did arrest her, and she was booked into jail. And what would a cop that was really a statesman, that was really sincere about his oath of office, what would a sheriff have his deputies be doing if he took his oath of office seriously, then, or now? He would have his deputy get on that bus and sit down next to Rosa Parks, and make sure she got off the bus safely and got home in the same manner. And so when they make laws that are now today a violation of the First Amendment. Okay, let's talk about guns. Let's start in California and work our way east, shall we? In California, they're confiscating guns, they're arresting people who have guns in their cars. They're taking the guns, and even if the guy is found not guilty, the guns are still confiscated and destroyed under the nuisance law. You never get it back whether you're found not guilty or not. The right to keep and bear arms right now is subject to what? Government approval. Period. End of sentence. Nationally, there's one state that has no permits. You can carry concealed or open anywhere in the state. It's Vermont. Thank you. Guess who has the lowest crime rate? Which state has the lowest crime rate every year? When they're not very populated, it's the crime rate per population, per capita we're talking about there. And yet, most people in this country don't even know that exists today. They don't, but they have that going on there. And boy, that brings us into now, of course, this book. This one's kind of beat up. This is my own copy, where I give my speeches out of it. In my son's school at middle school in Provo last year, he was taught that the word in the Second Amendment, in his government class, militia referred to, do you know it, referred to the National Guard, or the U.S. Army. Do you know how stupid that is? And this liberal teacher was trying to rewrite history, literally rewriting history, and telling my son a lie. Teaching him not what the Founding Fathers intended. Do you know that he could look up in any contemporary dictionary today and find out militia, and it's right? Look up in the dictionary militia. I've yet to see one that was really wrong. They all call them a citizens volunteer group. That's exactly what it is. It's a volunteer group of citizens. So is